And what they do is, upon entering the business, they immediately suss out who the important people are, who the unimportant people are, who can help them, who can't help them. And what they'll do is they'll foster these relationships. So with the high above, the people in the upper echelons of the corporation, they'll establish these friendships. So they get along really well with them. Those are the patrons. Then they'll the people that can't do anything for them, they just ignore. Or they can be pawns if they are useful. So a psychopath may be friendly with someone he views as a pawn, someone he can use just to help in his ascent to the top of the corporation. What he'll do is he'll use their work, he'll have them make excuses for them, and he'll also use them in what Babiet calls, I can't remember the term he uses it, but psychopaths will basically create conflicts within the environment. They'll set people against each other, and then they set it up in such a way that they are the ones that benefit from these conflicts. And when you expand that into a geopolitical environment, you can see that this is exactly what a false flag operation is. It's setting up these rivalries, setting up these conflicts that benefit a hidden group. So we have Americans fighting Muslims, and it's this manufactured conflict that only benefits the psychopaths, because if either side of the actual fight was to know the whole story, they wouldn't want to do it, and they'd want to find out who is really responsible. And that's the whole 9/11 movement. We've got people that are seeing this, and so that's really what it comes down to. Is 9/11 is a typical just psychopathic maneuver, and you find this in all kinds of true crime books, the same kind of thing, but people aren't really comfortable applying it to a political level. It's like, again, going back to the true crime literature, you read about families of psychopaths who, upon learning of who and what let's say their father really is, many of them can't believe it and are in complete denial. And if you apply that to the American system and the American public, a lot of people are in denial because it is like a family. It is like finding out that their father is a serial killer. For some people, it can be so life-shattering that they won't even go there. And unfortunately, that's a big block. And this block is what makes it so unbelievable. And like you said, hopefully, for people that read Ponerology, that read the books on psychopathy, like Snakes in Suits, it creates a framework from which these things are more understandable and not so unbelievable.
And that gives us the chance to defend ourselves against it. I see patterns, Harrison, in American politics where the really bad stuff, the big lie, the big crime, gets covered up just by people turning away from it, whereas smaller crimes get prosecuted and acknowledged and written into the historical record. Just a couple of examples. Watergate, of course, the break-in to Democratic headquarters. I mean, that's what people think of when they think of Watergate. Is just this break-in to try and get political dirt or something, which is really pretty minor compared to other stuff that's gone on. The murder of the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, and so on. The attempt at a military coup against Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Pearl Harbor deception, Operation Northwoods, the Liberty deception, which Johnson apparently conspired with the Israelis to murder hundreds of American seamen on an unarmed ship, and on and on and on. There are these really, huge things. And of course, 9/11 and anthrax and so many things that have been going on since. These really big crimes we can't face. They're too evil. And instead, Clinton is, caught with his pants down, or, Nixon is caught with some burglars in an office, and that we can deal with. And maybe when people read Ponerology, they'll be able to stretch their minds enough to deal with some of these larger crimes, which really need to be acknowledged if they're going to be prosecuted and corrected.
Well, I want to make another point about the relationship of all this, these big crimes, and on the topic of torture. The whole torture scandal is another typical psychopathic maneuver, and it's straight out of the totalitarian handbook. The idea of creating this outside enemy. First of all, that's right out of 1984. Orwell could see that the government was the one setting up the resistance bombings, and And, well, I just find it somewhat annoying that people that cite Orwell can't see this happening in ordinary, like, real life. But anyway, so we've got this.
I agree.
We've got this fake enemy, and well, how do you create a fake enemy? You need actual people. So you do exactly what the communists did, or what the Nazis did. You get a whole bunch of people, you round them up. They're most likely and probably they're completely innocent of the crimes you're going to charge them with. What you do is you torture them, you get them to admit to what you want them to admit to, and then you stage a public show trial where they reveal that they are what the government needs them to be. And this serves a bunch of purposes. Not only does the torture fulfill the aggressive desires and urges of the psychopaths doing the torturing, it serves as an intimidation factor for the rest of the population. This is what the communists did in all of the Eastern Bloc countries. People were afraid, and the government knew it. The government, the secret service agent, or the secret intelligence agencies, secret police, would torture people, and the people knew about it. Even if it wasn't talked about in the news or even in public conversation, this was really private stuff. People knew and they were terrified. And that's the purpose of this. One of the purposes of this whole torture scandal is that this is showing that, well, this is what you do when you're a terrorist. This is what we do to you when you're a terrorist. And who's a terrorist? Well, that definition is expanding more and more every day, so that people who merely dissent, people who don't agree with these policies, can and will be labeled terrorists. And this is basically saying, well, this is what we're going to do to you.
And it's a lesson. It's a lesson to the herd. Stay in line. Well, some members of the human herd aren't really willing to put up with this forever, and I'm certainly one of them, and I hope you are too. We'll be back in a bit. This is Kevin Barrett talking to Harrison Koehli of Red Pill Press about Ponerology, the science of psychopaths in power. Military, the CIA, and organized crime. Who are these people that do this sort of thing? That's what we're talking about right now with Harrison Koehli of Red Pill Press. Harrison is a specialist in political ponerology, the science of evil for political purposes, which is the applied psychology or psychopathy of psychopaths in power. Hot new topic. I wrote about it in a very popular essay called Twilight of the Psychopaths, which I hope to turn into a book, and I will be picking Harrison's brains as I expand that book. Harrison, in the work I've read on psychopaths, there's often this sense that you get from authors like Martha Stout, who's written a couple of good books on the topic, that these psychopaths are kind of shallow or empty inside in a certain way, that they can put up a good imitation of just about anything, but what they're imitating just isn't there. She says that you can't imagine a psychopath really actually understanding great poetry or even okay poetry. Is that something that you've encountered in your work? This notion that they're kind of empty people?
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea goes right back to the first real great work on psychopathy, Mask of Sanity by Hervé Cleckley. And the idea is that psychopaths lack something. Normal people growing up, they have this emotional content. We can call, Lobachevsky calls it an instinctive substratum. We have these instinctive reactions to things that happen in our environment. These are emotional reactions. Growing up, we learn empathy. We learn to feel another's pain. And these things become just totally natural. So that things that seem to us self-evident really aren't to a psychopath. And that's, again, where confusion comes into the picture here. Because psychopaths are born without any of these higher emotions. They may feel what some of their experts call proto-emotions. Now, this can be just simple anger or frustration, or just the rush, the adrenaline rush of being chased by a police officer, being shot at, or something like that. You hear stories like that in Robert Hare's book Without a Conscience about the criminal type. But psychopaths lacking this don't have any comprehension or even any idea of what it really means to be a human. like you said, they wouldn't be able to appreciate poetry or art or anything with any emotional content. Now, the emotional content, like I said, is what makes us human. Psychopaths lack that. So, for a parent to see that their child is a monster is a tough thing. What Babiet calls, I can't remember the term he uses it, but psychopaths will basically create conflicts within the environment. They'll set people against each other, and then they set it up in such a way that a psychopath may be friendly with someone he views as a pawn, someone he can use just to help in his ascent to the top of the corporation. What he'll do is he'll use their work, he'll have them make excuses for them, and he'll also use them in what they do is upon entering the business, they immediately suss out who the important people are, who the unimportant people are, who can help them, who can't help them. And what they'll do is they'll foster these relationships, so with the ones that benefit from these conflicts. And when you expand that into a geopolitical environment, you can see that this is exactly what a false flag operation is. It's setting up these rivalries, setting up these conflicts high above the people in the upper echelons of the corporation. They'll establish these friendships, so they get along really well with them. Those are the patrons. Then the people that can't do anything for them, they just ignore, or they can be pawns if they are useful.